Hi sewing friends, welcome to my sewing room. My name is Beth, and if you're new, welcome. Today's quilt block is called the Friendship Block. I went into my 2.5-inch square scrap drawer and I pulled out these pretty blues. I even happen to have these half square triangles in there, so I didn't have to do a lot of prep work to make this block. So if you have a drawer full of probably any size squares, you can make this block really easily, and this is called a friendship block. Like I said, it would be fun to make a few of these and share them with your friends. Write your name right there, and your little quilting group could have a memory quilt. Each of you could have a memory quilt. I like this block and I'm going to share it with you how I made it today. Let's get started. To make my block, I need some half square triangles, and I have 8 half square triangles that, like I said, were in my 2.5-inch drawer. I also need 8 blue squares that are also 2.5 inches, and then I need some white squares. Now I started with 9 squares, which you would need if you use all squares, but I'm also going to show you a way that you can use a strip to replace 3 of those squares. Now to make those half square triangles, here is another block I was working on recently where I took my squares, a print, and a white or background square to make those half square triangles. If you don't have them already made, use 3-inch squares to get that 2.5-inch measurement. And after you draw a pencil line from corner to corner, you can sew on both sides of that pencil line, press them open after you cut along the pencil line, and then trim them all to 2.5 inches. Now that I have all of my pieces, all I need to do now is lay out my quilt block, and I'm going to begin with the center. Sort of looks like a cross, and I will be using all squares right now, but in a minute I'll show you how to substitute those squares for a strip. And then I'll go around with my blue squares. I'll place them around those white squares, and then I'll add my half square triangles. If you are going to use this block for a signature quilt, it might be easier to have that center rectangle smooth so the quilters can write their names. So I'm going to substitute 3 squares for a strip that's 2.5 inches by 6.5 inches. I sat down at my machine and started sewing these squares and half square triangles together in 2s and then 3s, and once I got all of my rows together, I put those rows together with pins, trying to move that the seam to the darker fabric. This beautiful blue scrappy block measures 10.5 inches square, and I mentioned earlier that you could use any size square. You would just have to adjust that center strip. If you decided to insert the rectangle, it would need to, line up with your squares, but any size square would work. I like this 2.5-inch size. I think it makes a nice block, especially if you're going to share them with other quilters and make a friendship block like it was intended for. So thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.